All right, all right, all right. The date, October 25th, 1925. The time, it wasn't Monday Night Football, I can tell you that much. It was scheduled for 2:30 in the afternoon. The teams, the Buffalo Bisons, the New York Giants, the place, the Polo Grounds in New York. It was, as I said, was scheduled for October 25th. This would become the first game in Giants history that wound up getting postponed due to a storm. It was the Buffalo Bisons were coming to town to play the New York Giants at the Polo Grounds. And it didn't happen on October 25th. However, it did get postponed until about 10 days or so later on November 3rd, which wound up being Election Day. So the game, the game eventually did get played, but not at the appointed time and date. It was a horrible storm. Absolutely, that really. I was looking up on I don't know, on Google and all, see if I can see like hurricanes in thinking maybe it was a hurricane that came through in New York or where. I couldn't find anything where it said actual hurricanes, but I mean this storm was really really bad. It was some gale force winds and people died, and I got a couple articles I'm going to wind up reading, just kind of go to show you. What kind of effect this storm had, and also there was some games too. I think there was 9 games scheduled for that particular day, and 4 of them didn't go end up getting played. I'll go over those too in just a bit here, but also it was just to kind of show. I mean, you kind of you talk about like nowadays and everything, with the crazy weather and, global warming, whatever, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and most people seem to think there is, but, there was bad weather back then as well, too. But now it seems like back then, more things were, it was with the weather and all, it was hard to forecast it and everything. But back then, there were a lot of things that happened like up in New York and all that, had to do with coldness. I mean, obviously nowadays seems like with the global warming, a lot of things are, more heat related. But the game was scheduled for the 25th of October 1925, which was on a Sunday. Now the storm came blowing through. I think it might have been it was on at least the 24th. Some of it might have been on the 23rd on the Friday as well. Before there were hurricane tornadoes, I believe, in Alabama. This is October we're talking about. But also, I found this article on ABC News, and it said the record snow in October for New York City is 0.8 inches. So basically not quite an inch. However, the interesting thing was, this storm that came blowing through with the rain and the wind, made it impossible to play the game. So it was the amount of rain and the wind. So this was the one weekend, October 24th and 25th. So, but then I found this article. The record for snow in October in New York City was 0.8 inches, which was set on. Now, this article is about 10, 12 years old. So it's not so much the amount of snow, but it's the date, right? So it's in this article from ABC News. The record for snow in October for New York City is 0.8 inches. Which was set on October 30th, 1925, which was the Friday after this game. So this game was scheduled to play on the 25th, which was a Sunday. So 5 days later, they had snow. Almost, not quite an inch, whatever, 4/5 of an inch. So, we're talking minute amount of snow. But just to go to show you, I mean, how kind of crazy things were, is that, as I said, this article I'm reading is from 2011. Now, has it been broken since this point in time? I don't know. Has there been like an inch or so of snow in New York City since 2011? I don't know. But I just found it interesting because, there was a horrible storm with the wind and the rain that blew through New York City. Because remember, we got the Polo Grounds. We're not talking Jersey here. We're not talking MetLife Stadium. We're not talking Giant Stadium. We're not talking North Jersey. We're talking New York City Polo Grounds. That's where this game was supposed to be played. So the weekend the game was rain and wind being horrible. And then 5 days later, they had snow, which, as I said, minute amount. But it was the, as of 2011 anyway, it was the most snow in New York City recorded. Could there have been more, like in the 1800s or 1700s? Absolutely. But we're talking, recorded history. Happened 5 days later after this game was over, or it was scheduled to play. So, but not only that, but that was Friday, October 30th. They had snow. Well, 2 days later, I mean, just once again, minute amount of snow. But 2 days later, the Giants wind up playing their a home game against the Cleveland Bulldogs, and actually it wound up being their first ever win. So you had the record snowfall in October for New York City, and 2 days later, the Giants wound up winning their first ever professional football game. So just found it kind of odd. It's just some crazy weather back then. So the Buffalo Bisons, they are an interesting group. I'm going to go over some of their history here, a little bit of their history. But let's see here. 1925. They started. They were like in the teens and all, but I mean, they were one of the original members. Actually, they were called the Buffalo All-Americans back in 1920, 21 and all. But by the time the 1925 rolled around, they were the Buffalo Bisons. They just changed their name. But 1920 and 21, interestingly enough, they were a very good team. A very, very good team back then. And one of the years they actually kind of got swindled, shall you say, out of the if you want to call it that much, out of the championship. Interestingly enough, but I said I'll go over that in just a second. The 1921 was a tough year for them. I feel bad for Buffalo because they went to four straight Super Bowls. They lost them all. They had very good teams. They didn't quite make it. But then, of course, I also was reading 1921. The Buffalo was All-Americans back then. Actually had coulda, shoulda, possibly could have won the championship back then. But they didn't. So very, very interesting things here. So here we go. All right. So in 1925, the Bisons wound up finishing with a record of 1-6-2. I said 1920 and 21, they were very, very good. There was 20 teams in the NFL back then. As I said, the Bisons, they finished looks like 2019, 18, 17. They were like number 15. They were 1-6-2. There was 1, 2, 3. There was 5 teams in 1925 who didn't win a game. So the Buffalo Bisons were the Hammond Pros and the Buffalo Bisons each won a game. Then there were 5 teams: the Dayton Triangles, the Duluth Kellys, the Columbus Tigers, Milwaukee Badgers, and the Rochester Jeffersons. Those 5 teams didn't win a game at all. But the Buffalo Bisons, they wound up 1-6-2. They were not very good. The points the Buffalo Bisons scored, they scored 33 points. They averaged 3.7 points per game. They averaged basically a field goal a game. Points against, they averaged 12.6 points per game given up, which they were 16th out of the league as far as 12.6 points per game, 16th out of 20 as far as giving up points. So I mean, they were not a very good team then. Let's see here. They had, I think I mean, the Giants, I believe, if I remember correctly, had 29 guys on their roster who for the whole season. Now, not everybody played a whole season. Like I was going to say, there was some of their guys, like Jim Thorpe only played three games. A couple other guys only played a couple games. So not everybody played most of the season. Some guys got injured and they couldn't play. It's not like the way it is nowadays. Somebody gets a bad knee injury and it's the season's over, right? Sometimes if it's bad enough, the career is over. But back then, let's see, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. They had 22 guys on their roster played the whole season. And as I said, they played 9 games, and they only had 22 guys. Their average age was 24.2, so relatively young, but they were not a very good team. As I said, the Giants, that season, the Giants wound up finishing 8-4. They had a very good record. The Giants points for they scored 10 points a game, 10.2 points a game, which was actually 5th best in the NFL. Points against, the Giants gave up 5.6 points per game in their season their team debut, 1925. So 5.6 points per game was 5th best in the NFL. They only gave up 67 points all season long. And I said they wound up finishing 8-4. Their coach was Bob Folwell. The Buffalo Bisons was Walt Koppisch, or Koppisch, Koppisch, Koppisch or Koppisch. That was their Buffalo Bisons coach in 1925. And I said, and the Giants wound up with, I believe they had said they had like 29 guys on their team for the whole season. Let's see. Now with the Giants started the season off 0-3, and then they wound up. They won 8 of their final 9 games. Their only loss was, which I'm going to have a video obviously on this. It was on Sunday, December 6th. They lost at home to the Chicago Bears 19-7. That was their only loss out of their final 9 games. But they started off. I did videos on this. They lost to the Providence Steamroller 14-0. Then they played the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, lost 5-3. Then their first home game ever was against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets on October 18th. Their first ever. They lost 14-0. So this was supposed to be the Giant on October 25th. The Buffalo Bison was supposed to be their second ever home game at the Polo Grounds. But, as I said, due to the storms, it was just not quite meant to be. So the game got postponed and was rescheduled for November 3rd, 1925, which was Election Day. But in between, that time there, they wound up playing on November 1st. They wound up playing the Cleveland Bulldogs at home, and they beat the Bulldogs 19-0, which gave the Giants their first ever franchise victory, 19-0 on November 1st. But quite interestingly now is that, the Giants just played a game against the Arizona Cardinals, and in 4 days, they got to play the San Francisco 49ers. So they got to play 2 games in 4 days. Well, back then, the Giants actually played back-to-back games against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets on October 17th and October 18th. October 17th, the Giants played in Frankfurt on a Saturday. The next day at home, they played Frankfurt Yellow Jackets on October 18th. So Saturday and Sunday. Imagine that. And the guys who played the game played 60 minutes. So they played 60 minutes Saturday. They played 60 minutes Sunday. Right. Well, here, same thing here. They were going to play Sunday, November 1st at home against the Cleveland Bulldogs. And then 2 days later, they're going to play Tuesday football, Tuesday night football, baby. Right. They were playing, which is, I'm going to do a video on this one, the actual game that actually happened where the Giants beat the Bison 7-0. But that was not yet to come. But as interestingly enough, with Buffalo, now I got let's see here, 1921. The Buffalo, they were called the Buffalo All-Americans back in 1921. 1920 and 21. They were decent. 1920, They were 9-1-1. If I can get out here somewhere. Let's see. Nope. Hold on. Let me see. Let me type this in here. 1920. But their record was so good. However, the Akron Pros were undefeated. The Akron Pros were 8-0-3. The Buffalo All-Americans were 9-1-1. Back then, what wound up happening was whoever, from 1920 to 1932, the team with the best winning percentage won the championship. So even though the Buffalo All-Americans were 9-1-1, their winning percentage was 900. They still didn't win the championship because Akron Pros with a record of 8-0-3. Their winning percentage was 1,000 because back then ties did not count in the standings. Ties were just nothing. So basically, the Akron Pros were 8-0. But they're not like one of those teams that you look, the undefeated Dolphins from 72 and all of that, because the Dolphins were totally undefeated. They were 17-0-0. They were 14-0 during the regular season, and they beat the Browns in the divisional round 20-14. They beat the Steelers in the championship game 21-17. Then they beat the Redskins in the Super Bowl 14-7. So they were 17-0, no ties, all wins. The Akron Pros here were 8-0-3 in 1920. So they were undefeated, but not a true undefeated. So even though the Buffalo All-Americans in 1920 were 9-1-1, they didn't win. They were not quite good enough. 9-1. I mean, as unbelievable as that is, 9-1-1 was not good enough to win the championship. Now, 1921, they were once again, they were 9-1-2, and they did not win the championship. Oddly enough, it's called the Staley Swindle. Now, interesting. A little known fact here: the Chicago Staleys in 1921 won the championship. They had a record of 9-1-1. The Buffalo All-Americans were 9-1-2, and I'm going to go more in depth and detail here in just a moment on who won, why the Staleys won. But interestingly enough, I believe the next season the Chicago Staleys, would become the Chicago Bears. So 1920, 1921, it was the Chicago Staleys. In 1922, the Chicago Staleys became the Chicago Bears, interestingly enough. But it was there was a little thing called the Staley Swindle. All right, let's see here. I got a bunch of tabs open up here. It's gonna, as I said, this go a little more in depth and detail. All right, so the Buffalo. Let's see. So 1921, the Buffalo All-Americans. They had a record of 9-1-2. And I got a couple of things here. The Buffalo All-Americans, 1921 season. Oops. Is this it? There we go. It's called the Staley Swindle. Basically, the Chicago Staleys. They swindled them out of the championship, right? On November 27, 1921, now also keep in mind here, see if I can get the originally, 1921, the Buffalo All-Americans scheduled originally 10 games. They played 10 games originally. They finished those 10 games. They were 8-0-2. They were undefeated. They were 8-0-2. But back then, a lot of them, the owners and all and everything wanted to get more games, because more games obviously meant extra money, and to play games and get some good attendance meant actually making some money. And it was very difficult back then for teams to make money because attendance was not always good. So to play, to schedule an exhibition game here, an exhibition game there meant some chances of making money. It's not the way it is today. I mean, today there's TV money and all that. So every team's guaranteed to make so much money. Well, it wasn't like that back then. They had to schedule like some exhibition games here and there just to make some money, right? Which was huge. A lot of teams went under because they just couldn't afford to continue to play. So that's why a lot of these teams, they want to just, they picked up a game here, picked up a game there, just to maybe get some extra money. So on November 27, 1921, the All-Americans claimed the APFA title. APFA, right, which stood for Associations of Professional Football Analysis, which would, of course, becoming, I believe, in 1922, became the NFL. So 1920 and 21, the NFL was called the APFA, the Association of Professional Football Analysis. So that's what the APFA stands for, interestingly enough. All right. They had a record of 9-0-2. Actually, I see a record of 8-0-2, so I'm not sure. I'm looking. I see they played 10 games, not 11. So I have them with 8-0-2, but Wikipedia here has them at 9-0-2. So they finished their regular schedule games. They were undefeated, whether they 8-0-2 or 9-0-2. They finished their regular season game undefeated, and they claimed the title. The title was theirs. But, however, for some reason still unknown, their owner, Frank McNeil, who owned the team for, I think, the first 4 seasons from 1920 to 23, I think it was, he agreed to play 2 more games. He should have just called it quits. But as I said, the lure of making maybe some extra money against some good teams was just too valuable to him, too important to him. So, but he did tell the Buffalo media that the 2 games were exhibitions. It would have no bearing on the team's claim for the title. So they would have no bearing on the team's record. We won. We're 8-0-2 and 9-0-2. We're the champions. I scheduled 2 more games. They don't. This once again, this is what I'm reading from Wikipedia. Now, this actually happened. Who knows? So I'm going by is what Wikipedia. So basically, he had 2 extra games. They have no bearing on our records. If we lose them both, it don't mean nothing. They're just exhibition games. It's all they are. We are the champions. Unfortunately, there we get screwed. So he had scheduled 2 more games, and he said they were both exhibition games and have no bearing on the team's claim for the APFA title or the NFL title. George Halas and the Staleys managed to capture second place in the APFA in 1921, with their only loss of the season came against Buffalo. McNeil scheduled the 2 additional games against the Akron Pros and the Staleys back-to-back. Now, the Akron Pros were a very, very good team, too, because they won the title in 1920. So the Akron Pros were a very, very good team in 1921. And actually, we got it here. Whoops. The Akron Pros were 8-3-1. So, I mean, Akron Pros were a very good team. So he scheduled, supposedly exhibition games against like the 2 best teams other than them, the second and third best teams. He scheduled against them. He didn't schedule them against weak, poor opponents. He was one against the best 2 other teams in the whole league. Let's see. Okay, so and of course now see, this is one of the stupid things that they did back then too, right? McNeil scheduled the 2 additional games against the Akron Pros and the Staleys back to back. The first game was scheduled for December 3rd against the tough Akron Pros because they were champions the year before. They were very good in 1921. And, he wound up gambling that, hopefully if they did lose that, it wouldn't count against them. And said, they wound up beating the Akron Pros. Let's see. And I got, so they beat the Akron Pros 14-0. Okay. Let's see here. So after they beat the Akron Pros 14-0, they would take an all-night train to Chicago to play the Staleys the next day. The All-Americans defeated the Pros 14-0, arriving in Chicago worn out and in no condition to play the Staleys, and they lost 10-7. And McNeil still believed his team was the APFA's 1921 champion, and even invested in tiny gold footballs for his players to commemorate the achievement. However, Hallis declared that the title was Chicago's, basing his claim on his belief that the second game of the Buffalo-Chicago series mattered more than the first. But according to the Buffalo, these games don't matter at all. They're exhibition games. He also pointed out that the aggregate score of their two games was 16-14 in favor of the Staleys because, let's see, where are we at here? The Buffalo All-Americans beat the Chicago Staleys 7-6 in the first game, and then they lost 10-7. So the Staleys had actually outscored them 16-14 in the two games, even though, you can also look at it too, even though both of the games were played in Chicago. Let's see here. McNeil insisted the Buffalo All-Americans were the champions, still maintaining that the last two games his team played were merely exhibitions. It didn't matter. All right. The league awarded the championship by a vote of the association's executive committee in January 1922 to the Staleys. The episode is referred to by several sports historians and Buffalo sports fans as the Staley Swindle. McNeil, the owner of the All-Americans, eventually went to his grave trying to get the league's decision overturned. In their decision, based on a generally accepted but now obsolete rule that if the two teams play each other more than once in a season, the second game counts more than the first. The executive committee followed established tradition. Had Buffalo not played the last game, they would have been an undefeated season and won the title. In both 1920 and 21, the Buffalo played all of its games at home. The lone exception being that there was two matches that they played in Chicago in 1921 and one against the Detroit Tigers. So they played every one of their games. Not the Detroit Tiger baseball team either, but they played two games on the road in 1921, and then they played the Detroit Tigers. I'm trying to look. I don't even know what I don't even see them playing the Detroit Tigers in 1920. Let me see. Look again. I don't know. Maybe unless it was an exhibition game. I don't know. I see the Detroit. They say they played the Detroit Tigers on 1921, but I don't. It looks like they were the home team. It says Detroit Tigers at the Buffalo All-American. So I don't know. Maybe they played them in an exhibition game or something. I'm not exactly sure, but they were undefeated, right? The owner scheduled two additional games, and and had he not scheduled those two additional games, they would have been the undefeated champions of the 1921 season. They played their at Canisius University. It's a private Jesuit university in Buffalo, New York. It was founded in 1870 by Jesuits from Germany and is named after St. Peter Canisius. Kinesis offers more than 100 undergraduate majors and minors and around 34 masters and certificate programs. So Kinesis College has been around since 1870, but that's where the Buffalo All-Americans / Bisons, they changed their name. That's where they wind up playing their games at, was at Kinesis College. Very, very interesting. Now, let's see here. The Buffalo, they wound up, here we go. 1920 and 21. 1920, they were not. It just kind of shows you the downward spiral. Basically, they almost played all of the 20s. There was one season they didn't. 1920, they finished 9-1-1. 1921, they finished 9-1-2. They wound up in second place. 1922, they were 5-4-1, and this is where they started kind of going downhill a little bit. 1923, they were 5-4-3. 1924, they were 6-5-0. That would be their final winning season. 1925, this season that we're talking about here with the Giants, they were 1-6-2. 1926, they were 4-4-2. 1927, they were 0-5-0. 1928, they were suspended operations for a season. Then they came back for one final season in 1929, and they were 1-7-1, and that was it. They were no mas. They were the let's see here, 1920, 21, 22, and 23. They were the Buffalo All-Americans. 1924 and 25, they were Buffalo Bisons. 1926, they become the Buffalo Rangers, and in 1927. And 29, those final two seasons, they came back as the Buffalo Bisons once again. So, I mean, they had a kind of a crazy history there. Now, also, and I just X'd out of it, but interestingly enough, the whoops, if I can, I don't even know if I'll be able to get in here. Let's see, 1920, but they had a They were involved. The Buffalo actually was at the time. It was the Buffalo All-Americans. Not sure if I'll be able to. Nah. But they were involved in the first ever trade. And I can't. I know I saw this someplace, but the first ever trade. In NFL history was basically played. It was between the Buffalo All-Americans. They traded for a guy, interestingly enough. So the Buffalo All-Americans were the first team, and actually was the I think it was them and the Akron Pros. I had it up here, and I do apologize. There was something up here that wound up that had him, and unfortunately I wound up Xing out of it. But the 1920, the Buffalo All-Americans were involved in the first ever trade in the NFL, interestingly enough. So what happened? Well, on over the storms that wound up coming in were just unbelievable. And I saw so many articles here. This one here I got here. Storms play. This is from this is from on the Monday. So basically, this is talking about what was going on Sunday, the day the game was supposed to happen. It says storms play havoc in the east and in the south. 4 die here. Houses wrecked. Ships tossed. 16 dead in Alabama. Navy planes are smashed. Tornadoes ravage Alabama. It leaves a trail of ruin in Pike and Barber counties. Score of persons hurt. Homes and barns destroyed. Crops laid waste and forests devastated. I mean, I was looking. I'm like, was there a hurricane that went through? And I couldn't find anything. It says, gale hits Bay State City. Man is killed and 500 houses are wrecked in Woburn. Damage in Stoneham. Now, this is This is in Alabama. 16 persons are reported killed and more than a score injured by a tornado which struck Pike County, Alabama early today. Many homes were laid waste, causing thousands of dollars in damage. But there's, they got actually got names of people. Wow. One lady who passed, who died. Wow, this is unbelievable. In Good Hope section, 4 members of one family were killed instantly, and the parents are not expected to live either. But they said this is from the tornadoes. The known dead. This is Mrs. Peacock, aged 105 years old. Wow, she was born in 1820, and she died in a tornado. Wow. But anyway, I mean, wow, 105. But also here it says 17 big seaplanes piled up by a gale. What the heck kind of wind was? I mean, this is what the Giants were supposed to be playing in. And not only that, but the rain. It says 60-mile blow smashes pick. Some of their wording here is weird, but 60-mile blow smashes pick of Navy craft sent to Baltimore for a race pageant. 7 of the airplanes will be a total loss due to this wind. All torn from moorings, break wings, and pontoons. Racing ships saved will fly today. It says in Baltimore, Maryland, disaster rode in on the wings of a 60-mile gale today, and when night had come, 17 Navy planes had been piled up on the shores of the Patapaco, maybe river below Baltimore. 7 of them are a total loss, with the exception of the valuable motors, and the other 10 have broken tails, pontoons, and wings. I know there were other stories here. Party of 5 flung into sea. 1 rescues 2 others. Woman was blown out of window. This was on 2 in a motorboat drowned. 30 persons saved when 20 coal barges are torn from their tugs. Many houses unroofed. An 85-mile-an-hour gale breaks plate glass windows in Times Square. Now we're talking New York here. 4 persons were killed in a near New York City by a hurricane. Oh, here you go. All right. Well, here's the first mention I saw of a hurricane. 4 persons were killed in and near New York City by a hurricane, which attained a velocity of 85 miles an hour at 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So basically, the football game was supposed to be played at 2:30. But so 1:10 in the afternoon, they had an 85-mile-an-hour hurricane went blowing through. Shocking. The storm unroofed houses in Brooklyn, Staten Island, and New Jersey and broke plate glass windows, dislodged large signs, uprooted trees, and did other damage in Manhattan. While struggling to pull in a clothesline loaded with garments, a woman was jerked out of a window by a violent gust and died as a result of her fall to the pavement of the court 4 stories below. 2 men were drowned when a sudden blast of wind tilted them out of a motorboat on Rockaway Point. A little girl was killed by falling bricks at Little Falls, New Jersey. 30 persons were rescued when 20 empty coal barges, which were blown free from their tugs and scattered over the lower bay, were rounded up by police boats and Coast Guard cutters. The great string of flat-bottom boats had just emerged from Barrington Bay on the way to New York when high waves began to break over them, snapping their hawsers and sending them dancing off like giant corks. The deck houses of some of the barges were homes of the barges captains, and on 2 or 3 of the barges, women and children were reported in great danger for a time as water poured into their living rooms, broke the windows, and slapped their roofs and walls. Then it goes, preceded by 24 hours of rain. The wind was preceded by 24 hours of rain in which 1.34 inches of water fell in this city, so well over an inch. Shortly before noon, a heavy rain was falling almost vertically. So, as a northeast wind blew up fiercely, the rain came to an end at noon. The wind suddenly became terrific, blowing a hurricane for about half an hour after 1 o'clock and averaging upward of 60 miles an hour up to 4 o'clock in the afternoon when it began to die down gradually. The woman who was killed was Mrs. Lucille, 27 years old. She was she was an expectant mother. Absolutely. Her husband's cries from the fifth-story window brought help to her in the court below, but she was unconscious and mortally hurt. She was hurried to Roosevelt Hospital where a cesarean operation was performed. The child lived only 20 minutes. Unbelievable. Absolutely unfrickin' believable. Absolutely horrible. And then I got this is some more stories. Here's ruined death in storm's wake. Barges blown away, loose in bay, 2 drowned. New York City drew one breath from the storm. The reserve supply of water in the Croton Lakes reservoirs were increased until the city has a winter supply of good water. A severe storm having one center near New York City and the other near Oswego, New York, let loose all of its fury yesterday afternoon on the wings of a gale that blew 72 miles an hour and brought, now here we go. Now this says, this just goes to show you the difference, the non-accuracy of some of this stuff. So the wings of the gale blew 72 miles an hour and brought 2.1 inches of rainfall. Okay. At least 2 lives were lost. Ships were battered, houses blown down. Many freak accidents were reported, and a compelling picture was presented by the dashing of heavy waves over the Battery seawall. The twin storms moved northeastward, and storms warnings were hurried up the coast to the most remote Maine port. Strong shifting gales were expected until this morning when clear weather was foreseen. And there's an interesting little a couple other articles I got here that I'm going to wind up reading, which is kind of not funny in a way, but just kind of odd. But the heavy deluge that hit New York and vicinity came between 1 and 2 o'clock, right around when the Giants were supposed to play their game at 2:30. With a blinding downpour, wind that defied human opposition, and a ruffling of the seas that sent huge whitecaps bounding over the boardwalk at Coney Island, over the seawall at the Battery, and against every like structure in the metropolitan area. Old-timers said the Battery had not known such a sea lashing in 60 years. And this is just before the Giants were supposed to play a football game. 15 coal barges, which started under tow, broke loose and went adrift in the bay. The police and the Coast Guards were notified and launched number 4 of the Marine Police, and the steamer Manhattan went in quest of them. Let's see, 5 swept off of a boat. 5 men were washed overboard, and 2 of them were drowned off the Rockaway Point during the height of the storm. Just unbelievable. I mean, this was just, obviously just before the game was supposed to go underway. There's other articles. I could probably be here for another half an hour reading articles, but that just gives you a little bit of the taste of what was going on just before the game was supposed to start. I mean, they got a hurricane, blowing in. So just crazy stuff. So we got here, this is what kind of one of them kind of says here. It says, pros pull new one, rain stops football game. It says rain or shine. That's the little line that appears in boldface type on the things that are printed for those on a professional football game schedule. Rain or shine. We're going to play. Not today, you're not. But as proved yesterday, not always played at the Polo Grounds every Sunday afternoon. Just one of life's little jokes, folks. Well, it wasn't a little joke. Let me tell you what, because people dying. That was a heck of a storm. Yesterday's game between the Giants and Walter Koppish's Buffalo Bisons were postponed on account of rain, wet grounds. In fact, all of the catalog reasons a promoter can marshal. It was raining puppies at 1:30 when promoter Billy Gibson ordered the "No game today" sign out. A half hour. This is fun. This is where it gets funny in a way. It says, it was raining puppies at 1:30. They canceled. They said no game today. A half an hour later, the sun was beaming down. Go figure. But it's not the way it is today. Today, you can have 13 inches of rain in an hour on a football field, and the field's almost totally dry. I mean, because the way they have the drainage nowadays, they have to drain. I mean, they don't want stuff puddling up for football games and stuff like that. Well, it wasn't like that back then. It was just dirt. You know what I mean? So if it rained, there were puddles everywhere. Grounds too wet, the promoter Gibson assured us in explaining the postponement. It was just too wet. The boys would never have been able to play in 4 league boots. Money will be refunded for all tickets sold unless holders decide to use them Election Day. And some people did wind up using them on Election Day. And here's another one right here. Showers postponed game with Buffalo. The Giants to play Coppish's Bisons at Polo Grounds got moved to Election Day, which was November 3rd, 1925. Football is no fair weather game, but the rainstorm of yesterday was too much for even the professionals, and the game in the National Football League to have been played between the New York Football Giants and Walter Koppish's Buffalo Bisons at the Polo Grounds was postponed until Election Day, November 3rd, 1925. Tickets purchased for yesterday's game will be good on that day. However, the Giants' next game will be against the Cleveland Bulldogs here next Sunday, which which it was November 1st. Let's see here. Boop. Let's see. Oh, there we go. The appearance of Columbia's All-American halfback of last year with the Buffalo team was looked forward to with great interest, was evidenced by the number of telephone calls received at the Polo Grounds, where the office's force was kept busy answering calls all morning. So great an attraction is Coppish's that evidently there were hundreds who were ready to brave the elements and go to the game if it were played. So I mean, in the middle of a freaking hurricane, people are like, "Yeah, I'm ready to play." I'm sorry, I'm ready to go. Let's go. I got a raincoat. I got my umbrella. Let's watch some football. It was not decided until noon to call off the contest. The field was so soaked from the 2 days downpour that it would have been impossible for the players to do more than wallow around in the mud, and the turf would have been badly damaged. It is not expected that the game will suffer in patronage because of the postponement. On the contrary, it is likely that the holiday crowd that will turn out to see Coppish's will rival in size the one that saw the opening league game here a week ago when the Giants lost to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets 14-0. Now here it's what it has here. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There was 9 games that was scheduled for October 25th, but due to this hurricane, if you want to call it, right? 4 of the games were canceled. The Cleveland Bulldogs and the Cleveland and Canton, their game was canceled due to rain. Providence and Columbus was canceled due to rain. Dayton and Pottsville, their game was canceled due to rain. The Giants and Buffalo, their game canceled due to rain. And they were postponed, shall I say. And it was postponed to Election Day. The Chicago Cardinals beat the Chicago Bears 3-0. Detroit and Akron went to a 0-0 tie. Green Bay beat Rochester 33-13, and Rock Island, the Stapletons beat tied Kansas City 3-3, and Philadelphia, the Yellow Jackets, beat Dayton 3-0. So 9 games. I know the Milwaukee Badgers and another team didn't want to play. And Milwaukee Badgers, they weren't very good. But so there was two teams that didn't play. I know Milwaukee was one of them, but out of the 9 games that were scheduled because of the storm/hurricane, right? 4 of the games got canceled. Or I do apologize. I don't know if the others totally got canceled. They didn't get played that day, shall we say? I'm not sure if those other, because 4 of them got canceled but postponed. The Giants game went from the October 25th to Election Day, November 3rd. The other 3 games, I don't know if they ever got replayed. That I don't know. I didn't do my due diligence on that, so I do apologize there. But you can see what a horrific storm that was. Actually, a little clips there of one of the articles said it was a hurricane that went through. And some say it was like 70 miles an hour. Some say it was 80, some odd miles an hour. A lot of rain. So and you saw what happened. People died. I said there was other articles I read where buildings were destroyed and roofs got ripped off and awnings got ripped off and all kinds of horrible stuff. But I mean, if I kept reading article after article, this video would be like 3 hours long. So it was absolutely horrible. Of course, they didn't, probably didn't detect it as well as they do nowadays. Nowadays, we know 3 years in advance we got a hurricane coming in, so everybody batting down the hatches. They didn't know that at the time. So the game got canceled. As I said, even if they did play the game, there was so much water on the field that just wouldn't have been much of a football game at all. But the game did get postponed till about 10 days in the future. But so then after this was on a Sunday, October 25th. But so the following Sunday, the Giants would not only play again at home at the Polo Grounds, but they would get their first ever victory against the Cleveland Bulldogs, 19-0. And that's my video for tomorrow night. I'm going to go over the Giants' first ever victory, period. So, but that's what happened on this date, October 25th, 1925, in New York Giants football history. See you next time.